This is the code of Ur-Nammu, the oldest law in the world. It's 4,100 years old. This isn't the original. I'm a lawyer and I love the law. But where did the law start? Where did it come from? What is the oldest law in the world? Law started here. It's 2100 BC. This is the Fertile Crescent. Amazing soils. These are the Sumerians. They call themselves the black-headed people, and the brand new cutting-edge technology they've just discovered is irrigation. They're growing more food here than anywhere else on Earth. This is Mesopotamia, the city of Ur. Some say it has a population of 80,000 people. That's huge! Remember, this is the Bronze Age. The people in England are painting themselves blue and building houses out of mud and poo. But in Mesopotamia, King Ur-Nammu who is living in a golden age of discovery. Things are going well. This is King Ur-Nammu. That's him. He's built a city. He's conquered Mesopotamia and he's built pyramids, including the great ziggurat of Ur. And it's still there. It was rediscovered by William Loftus in 1850, buried in the sand. In the 1920s, it was excavated by Sir Leonard Woolley on behalf of the British Museum with money from the University Museum of Pennsylvania. Inside the ziggurat, Woolley and his wife Catherine found gold and silver and clay tablets that ended up in museums across the world. These two tiny tablets were found, catalogued, labelled and put into storage and forgotten.
If you want to be a good archaeologist, you gotta get out of the library!
30 years later, in 1952, the Dutch curator of the Istanbul Museum, Professor Kraus, was rummaging through the storerooms and happened to notice that these two clay tablets kind of looked like maybe they would fit together. The tablet is inscribed with little symbols, a long dead language. It's divided into 8 columns, which in turn are divided into 45 small lines. It's battered and weathered and only barely legible. Even so, it only took an American guy called Sam Kramer a few days to translate it. And on this tablet, he found 4 laws. We know that originally there were 50 laws on here, but 2 more tablets were found, copies. By putting them all together, we now have 29 laws. What's odd is that you already know them. This tablet of laws starts with an introduction. First off, it says these are the laws of the moon god Nammu. Then it explains that the moon god gives the king the right to rule. Oh, hang on, that's the same as today. When I go to court, hanging on the wall is the royal coat of arms that says the same thing, but in French, by God and by my right. It's the same thing that it says here. The king gets his authority from God. We prosecute in the name of the king. Different God, new king, same idea. Then it says everyone is equal before the law. That's the rule of law, Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights. Again, it's the same thing. Then we get some laws, and I recognise this stuff. It's 4,000 years old, but I can work with this. On this tablet we have criminal law, property law, sentencing guidelines, a system of fines, family law, divorce law. It's all here. Do you fancy a bit of 4,000-year-old criminal law? If a man commits murder, the sentence is death. If a man commits robbery, the sentence is also death. But for kidnapping, the punishment isn't death. It's prison and a fine of 15 shekels of silver. That's advanced and it's progressive. This then is a modern system of justice where there are financial penalties in place of physical punishments. King Ur-Nammu wrote a code of law because he was concerned for the well-being of his people. His subjects were encouraged to see him as a father figure who cared for his children and wanted only the best for them. For King Ur-Nammu, harsh penalties weren't needed because people know how to behave. Fines are merely a reminder. This is a sophisticated legal concept, compensation instead of mutilation, a written rule that can be read and referred to. I can work with this. I can take on a client and argue his case. So you know, a shekel is about 8 grams of silver. Silver is about 60p a gram today, so 15 shekels for a kidnapping is just under a tenner. Not much now, but a slave back then would have cost about 10 shekels. I have a maximum sentence. I can negotiate with the court. I can mitigate. The big difference with today are the laws of slavery. But you have to bear in mind that slavery has always been legal in human history. It was only abolished here relatively recently. If your slave is rude to your wife, you can scour her mouth with a quart of salt. If a slave marries a free man, their firstborn child belongs to the slave's owner. But under the law, slaves have rights too. So slave owners have duties and responsibilities. That's the law of liability. There are sexual offences too. It's all a bit sexist, of course, but you knew it would be. If your wife sleeps with another man, she's put to death. No penalty for the man. If a man sleeps with your virgin wife, then that guy is put to death. If a man rapes your virgin slave, then that guy pays a fine of 5 silver shekels. Divorce law, that's covered too. Divorcing your first wife will cost you 60 shekels. But if you divorce a widow, it's half price, only 30 silver shekels. And of course, there are laws for some mystical stuff. We don't have that anymore, but our witchcraft laws were only repealed in 1736. We've got buildings older than that in Hertford. If a man is accused of sorcery, he must go through trial by water. But if he's innocent, the accuser pays 3 shekels. Personal injury law. Put out a man's eye, that's worth 30 shekels. A foot is 10 silver shekels. Your nose is 40 silver shekels. That's quantum, and it's all quite sophisticated, really. Even lawyers' fees are covered. If a witness withdraws, he pays for the litigation. If you lose a case, you pay the costs. The code of Ur-Nammu was probably only observed by the lower classes. The upper classes regarded them as nothing more than guidelines.
New allegations that he broke his own COVID lockdown rules again.
16 separate piss-ups, most of them when the rest of the country was in full lockdown.
You should not be meeting friends. If your friends ask you to meet, you should say no.
So nothing much has changed. What happened next is fascinating. These laws spread far and wide. They were adopted and developed and expanded. First by the Babylonians, who thought 30 shekels for an eye and 2 shekels for a tooth was too liberal, and replaced it with an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Now you've heard that before. You see, Abraham, the father of Judaism and Christianity and Islam, was born in that ziggurat. The slaves in that city of Ur were Jewish. They wrote a version of these laws in the Torah. The 10 Commandments is a summary of this tablet. The Old Testament worked its way through history. It's the basis of English jurisprudence today. Our system of law was exported across a third of the planet, from America in the west to India in the east. Our laws today are based on this tiny little tablet, but that's not all. The ideas it contained spread far and wide. It's the root of all language, from Arabic to English. The little characters on here, they can be directly mapped to Chinese characters. These scratches on clay persisted. The first thing Sumerians did when they discovered writing was to write down this code of law. You can fall in love, but a marriage contract seals the deal. You can trade, but a legally binding contract settles disputes. The first ideas the Sumerians wrote down were laws. Civilization starts with law. King Ur-Nammu was killed in battle and immortalized in a poem that elevated him to legendary status as a great king who died for his people. That poem was recited for generations. His body lay tossed aside like a broken urn. His spirit descended to the underworld, where he was given a great banquet. I've put all 29 laws in the description below. If you want to know what happened next, Babylonian law, let me know in the comments. I'm Matt Fresco. Please smash that like button, subscribe and hit the notification bell. It's the law.
You gotta get out of the library.
Wow, it's beautiful.